Hi, I'm Curious Vedant, and welcome to season 6 of my podcast. Today, my guest is Nisha Mohan, who is a novelist and a human resource professional. She has authored 2 novels and she strives to write stories that are page turners with plot twists that'll keep her readers guessing till the end. Hi, Nisha. Welcome to my show.
Thank you for having me, Vedant. It's fantastic to be here and be interviewed by you.
Yes, and I'm very excited to interview you. I really, really love books, and this is going to be very fun for me.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to this.
So, Nisha, I'm curious to know, how do you come up with the storyline for a book?
All right. So it takes a few months to come up with the storyline. So I take inspiration from all around, right? Including my everyday interactions with folks, what I see on the news, what I see on the TV. So as writers, we're basically like sponge. We observe everything around us, we absorb, and then we stitch the exciting bits together to make an interesting story. So that's what we do.
Yeah, and it must take a lot of time to think of those storylines because I never knew it would take like months to think of a storyline.
It does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of time, but I think with practice and focus and attention, you can, kind of get closer to creating your storylines faster.
Yeah. So, do you come up with a story and then say, that sounds like a good story. Let me write it down or make a book about it? Or do you first decide that, okay, I want to write a book and then start thinking of a story?
Okay. So for me, what I do is I first create an outline. So that way the premise is clear, the foundation is clear. Then I go about detailing the story, the characters, because I think once you define the characters, it kind of becomes easier to build a story around it and, precisely how each of those characters would react when you put them in a certain situation. So that's what I do. But I never make it concrete. I ensure that it's fluid because that's when the creative process can flourish. So that's the way I do it.
Yeah, for me in school, I just when we write stories, we need to think of it just then and there.
On the go.
Yeah. Do you figure out the entire story at the start and then start writing? Or do you think of just a starter and the story keeps building on and evolving from that as you write the book?
So I largely figure out the premise of the story before I start. But like I said, it's not always concrete. And it shouldn't be that way because you're constantly bombarded with ideas and thoughts. And so I prefer keeping it open, even though I have a foundation and I kind of evolve on the go. So that's what I do.
Yeah, because it would be really hard to finalize on something at the start and then stick to that.
Yeah.
Because you start something and then you get a new idea. That sounds like a good idea, and you try to fit that new idea in. That's what happens to me sometimes.
And that's a good way of doing it as well. It helps.
And and as I said earlier, I in school, like probably every term or something, we need to do an assignment in English, like a writing assessment, where we need to write a story or an article or something.
Okay.
And when I do those, I struggle with finalizing one final idea. And like the ideas just keep jumping. Sometimes it's really hard to just stick to one idea and say, okay, this is the idea, I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah, I can totally relate to what you're sharing, Vedant, because it happens to us as well. Because you're constantly distracted or jumping from one idea to another. But I think as writers, it's important we, make a conscious effort to steer the attention back. And that comes, with practice and over time. So while you can, kind of play around with ideas every now and then, you should not lose focus on the main plot, which is what I recommend and which is what I follow as well. So I keep that focus on the idea, and every time I find myself, getting distracted and going to different, thoughts and ideas, I steer the attention back.
Yeah, it can be very frustrating.
Yes.
And because when I do it, sometimes I'm like, what do I do?
It does happen, and I think it's okay, because you're also at an age, like if you are writing, you're also at an age where you tend to get distracted and look at so many other things around you, and you want to incorporate that into your story. But try this, put down your main plot on the page, and when you are thinking, if you find yourself going in all different directions, then you start reading your main plot or premise, which can really, really help.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating how you authors find a way to finalize your ideas and make them into a 200, 300 page book.
Totally. I surprise myself sometimes as well.
Yeah, because I read books like Harry Potter, and some of them are like 900 pages long, and I wonder, wow, how does J.K. Rowling actually pull the story along for 900 big long pages?
Oh yes, that's a tough one to crack. So when you start with a premise with just 4 or 5 sentences, right? But then I think as you develop and build on your characters, on your storyline, you start fleshing out, the product. And for us, I guess, we take inspiration from all around. And I have actually incorporated a lot of characters and attributes of people around me into my books. So it really helps, when you're developing the storyline. So we use a lot of what we see around us to, kind of build and stretch our stories.
Yeah, and also, like I said, like I said, with the 900 page books, those are only one part because there's also like a whole series of books sometimes. Like if you have like, let's see, maybe Percy Jackson or Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating how they do that.
Yeah. I think all authors, all writers have their own way of, conceptualizing the kind of story that they want to work on, and what would grab the reader's attention. So we all do it differently. It takes a little time to kind of build on the plot. For some people, it takes a few months. For some, like I think J.K. Rowling took a couple of years to put that together. But eventually, what we have to put down over there is what would grab the reader's attention. So even if it's a 200 or a 900 pager, I think that's what every author is gunning for. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like thinking of stories, and I really like reading books.
That's wonderful. You've got a great hobby, including the podcast, which I love.
Okay. To what extent do you use your real life experience to influence your stories?
A lot, really. So I've always been an observer. I like to sit back and watch people and observe. And I do that a lot. So I have, in fact, incorporated a lot of characteristics and attributes of people from, around me into my books. And I kind of also, pull their legs especially my work colleagues in office and my friends. I tell them that, if you've not read my book, please go read it. You'll find yourself in it. So I do that a lot. In fact, one of the favorite, characters from both my books is something called satire. It's a witty alter ego in my second novel, and it's a spin-off on some of my close friends. So I really take inspiration from everyone around me.
Do you sometimes base the characters of yourself? But sometimes I do that in school.
On yourself? That's really interesting. I do that too. Yeah.
Like the main character, just it has like 10 million things that if you read them in a list, kind of make up yourself.
Yeah. I do that as well. Like I said, one of those characters that I created, Satire, is a spin-off on some of my friends. My sister, who's more close to me, says it's a spin-off on me. So we do that. I think if you have interesting bits in ourselves, we can add them into the characters and watch them come alive because we are closer to it. It really helps to develop on the character. Yeah,
it does. How do you develop twists in your stories to create suspense and keep your readers engaged?
So I think the best way to do that is you put yourself in the reader's shoes. That's what I do, because when you do that, you are thinking of all the possible outcomes that a reader would think of. And then the fun part is you do exactly the opposite. In a logical approach, of course. But then when you break the pattern, that's, when you get a twist and everyone is surprised. It's a lot of fun because, especially for the genre I write, which is mystery, suspense, and thriller, I get a lot of readers coming back to me and saying that, hey, I didn't expect that. That's unreal. And how did you do it? So I think it goes back to thinking on your toes on what your readers would expect, and then you do exactly the opposite in a logical way. Of course, it cannot be something which is absolutely out of the blue, because then it would be false. So there should be some connect. They should be able to connect the dots, but it should not be predictable. So try that out the next time you're writing.
Yeah, I will. Can you tell me a little about the two books that you have written so far? Have you started working on your third?
The two books. So the first book is an urban contemporary romance and suspense fiction novel. And it starts off as a one-sided love story and soon gets tricky as new characters emerge. The second book is a mystery suspense thriller where, I have a writer's world which careens into a series of twists because he unintentionally lands in a murder scene of a young woman. So it's all about how the investigation takes place and they kind of, identify who is the person behind the crime and why has it happened. So it makes for a very thrilling read. Yeah. And on the third book, well, I have a few thoughts. I think the last two books that I've written are fiction. I am looking at writing something maybe closer to the area of my professional expertise, which is HR. But I'm just, playing around with thoughts in my head right now. So nothing concrete on this.
This is the first time I heard that an author can self-publish their books. How do you do that?
So self-publishing is something that's picking up speed in the market now. And how we do it is you have these, forums. Like, for example, I have used Amazon. And when you self-publish, it's kind of different from the traditional publisher route, right? So you have to do everything, right? From writing to editing your book to working with designers for getting the cover page, for marketing. So we do all this, and then you have to go on to the portal, like for example, I have done on Amazon. You can create your own login. There's a lot of learning over there because you have to upload it in a certain format. You have to plug in a lot of information about the book, and then you publish it, and boom, it's released worldwide. So a lot of authors today are opting for self-publishing, and I think that's a great way to get your story out rather than wait for the traditional route, which is a long drawn process. And I'm sure you can do that too, Vedant, if you write sometime.
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
It
And
is.
it doesn't cost any money, right?
It doesn't, but it does cost a lot of time and effort. I think the only spend you have is when you do the self publishing. You definitely have to invest on a good editor because you cannot skip editing at any point if you have to get a good book out, and on a book designer, but everything else is all your time and efforts.
Yeah. Can you share any tips or advice for aspiring authors like me?
Oh, definitely. So writing, it's a lonely process because you're doing it by yourself. It definitely takes a lot of discipline, um, sacrifice, huge effort, and it's quite tedious. It'll drain you. It's tough, but my advice is never give up, because it's a journey that will help you grow, Vedant. When you complete writing a book and you see it out there in the hands of your friends and around the globe, it's one of the best feelings in the world. It's something else altogether. So if you plan to write, sometime, just ensure you dedicate good amount of time every day. You have to do it every day, towards the book, and that's the only way you can accomplish a task, because unless you spend time writing, it's just going to drag and take years for you to complete it.
Yeah, and in your books, do you usually like to put pictures in them, or do you like to do words only?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So for the two novels that I wrote, they were all words. It's more for the grown-ups, but I did write a children's storybook, sometime that was more so for my son. So that had a lot of pictures and colorful elements in it. So I think it's more dependent on the audience you want to cater to. I think the kids obviously like pictures, and for the grown-ups like us, it's more words. I bet you like a lot of pictures in your book.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. If I can't figure out what's going on, and I think, okay, I need a picture here, but otherwise I'm okay with any. Just like reading books.
All right.
What got you interested in writing novels? What did you want to be as a child?
So I've always loved a good read. I think I remember my childhood, and as early as when I was, maybe 6 or 7 years old, my mom enrolled us into a library membership back then, and I think I started reading at a very young age. So while reading, I said, why not write a book that can appeal to to Indian readers and to a global audience, which is something that I'm trying to do right now. So I guess I always lean towards art and creativity because I am right brained. So any form of art and creativity makes me happy. So as a child, to your second question, I wanted to be an artist, a creator, a painter, a writer. And I guess to some extent I've been able to, achieve that now with the habit of writing books. Yeah.
Because when you write books, you're making a form of art, and
Yes.
you're also.
Absolutely. It's all about creativity.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you so much, Vedant. It was really a pleasure talking to you. And I just want to say that it's wonderful that you do what you do. It's inspirational. You're a little child prodigy, which I tell your parents. So thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for coming. I really learned a lot and I enjoyed talking to you.
I'm glad you did. Thank you so much.
Dear listeners, follow my Facebook page, Curious Vedant, to get updates on my upcoming episodes. To listen at leisure on your phone and get notified about future episodes, subscribe by searching for Curious Vedant wherever you get your podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also listen to my show on curiousvedant.com. Thank you for listening to Curious Vedant. And don't forget to rate and leave comments